for errors, flaws, for mistakes. Without them we wouldn't be here. Let's hear it for inexactitude, for imprecision, bravo, for fudging it, hip hip, 3 cheers.
What we should know, or Peaceworker Radio, depending upon what you've seen in the past from our show. We have a guest, Paul Stephen Stone, a journalist.
Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure. And we are going to be speaking about the realignment. Tom Ashbrook from On Point, WBUR, spoke about the realignment in the Republican and Democratic parties in his On Point show today. We'll be speaking about the meltdown of both the Democratic and Republican parties and the reasons for this and the crisis in American politics from several different points of view. One of them historical, and of course from Paul Stephen Stone, who is an expert who's been looking at politics for his entire life. Paul, why don't we start off with that orange band that you have there? That's
from a program. See, it says "No more fear" on one side and "No more bullying" on the other, which is the tagline for an anti-bullying program that I created and piloted out in Randolph High School. And the concept is very simple. You indoctrinate the entire school in the concept that they will have responsibility for fighting bullying by wearing orange clothing, or at the very least an orange wristband.
Terrific. And
you give out orange wristbands to everybody in the school, including teachers and admin people. And you have to have a kickoff assembly to all the different classes. But and then periodically through the term, you basically hit the plate and keep it spinning on the stick. You just have Orange Fridays. At Randolph High School, the cafeteria workers took it upon themselves to wear orange on Fridays. And we had posters that were signed by all the kids in the school, or most of the kids. It was kind of nice. And the main point here is that you don't kind of put a layer of political correctness on people. You talk about taking responsibility. And it was successful for the year that we tried it at Randolph High School. And now we need to find other sponsors or schools that want to buy into this program. All the elements are there, but somebody will have to work with me to have them produced at this point. They're all designed and theoretically ready to be produced. 3 large banners that say "No more fear, no more bullying," and you hang them up around the school. Posters that you put up periodically. Raise your hand if you want to stand up against bullying, things of that sort. So it's kind of neat.
It is neat.
I need to find a sponsor or a distributor or somebody that wants to own the product, and I'd be happy to sell it or lend it or whatever. I just would love to get it out there. So it's very simple. That's probably why
it's simple and it's effective. Apparently effective.
Yes, I think it is.
The message is direct and clear.
It requires so little other than a basic commitment when you get up and get dressed in the morning to either wear the wristband, wear orange sneakers, wear orange, whatever.
And orange is a great color.
Yes. I wish I had it into the Denver Broncos. Yeah. I would think that would be the perfect sponsor.
It would be.
Yeah. So if anybody out there knows people in the Denver Broncos who want to sponsor an incredible but very simple anti-bullying program, just contact me. Go to paulstephenstone.com, and I'm contactable through my website. So thank you for the plug.
Paul Stephen Stone is contactable and easy to get along with. That's been my experience. The Denver Broncos, that's good. So you'd be interested in taking a trip out west, right?
For that purpose, absolutely.
Summer or winter? Winter you'd prefer? You ski?
No, I'm not a skier. It doesn't really matter. I went out to Chicago trying to sell the program to a company called United Stationers, and I have no idea why they didn't realize how, the great potential that resides in that program, but they didn't. So all the materials are designed. It's just ready. It's basically turnkey at this point. We just have to go to a manufacturer and have some banners and posters printed up, and that's about it.
And when you say turnkey, you mean easy to implement?
Very easy, very easy. You need to have somebody in the school system. In this case, in Randolph, my sister was what do they call them? Well, basically a guidance counselor, but it's a little more than adjustment counselor, they call them. And she took ownership. She was the in-school Orange Shield coordinator, and she is so greatly loved and placed in that school. So that is a big part of the success. You have to have the right person taking ownership of it. And everything else afterwards is really some self-regulating.
Can we talk a bit about bullying?
We can, sure. I have no idea why I'm so interested in that. I did a video called To You Who Are Different, which you can see on YouTube. To You Who Are Different. It's had about 20,000 views. And it keeps getting picked up at Peacecast. This is a web-based broadcast that happens every year on Peace Day, September 21st. But it's it's basically just talking about the fact that if you're different, that's special. It's not. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to feel bad about, and it's nothing to be harassed about either. So, and it was. My wife got an email from a woman who she used to know when she was working in a massage school, who told her that she had just put two and two together and realized that I was her husband, or she was my wife, because she had come across my To You Who Are Different, which I wrote out as a blog piece, and then I had printed up as little small posters, 8.5 by 11, and so people could put them up. And she had put it up on her refrigerator for her kids, because her kids had been raised to value their idiosyncrasies and their whatever sets them apart, as we all should value our idiosyncrasies. So it's been something for whatever reason that has been part. I was bullied when I was a kid, but everybody was bullied, so you don't necessarily take that and create programs and blogs, but I really dislike bullying. And I wrote a piece on my blog. If you go to paulstonesthrow.com, and when you get to the first page, put in, I think it's called When the Bullies Come For You. And it's a very powerful piece. But it kind of amplifies this whole feeling of being the one who's the subject of, most of the time in schools, you just hope that you're the one that doesn't catch attention. You slink on by when somebody's being bullied and hope that the bullies don't see you. But so I guess in my adulthood, I thought it was time to start doing something about it. So
I wouldn't agree with that. I would agree with the fact that you were probably one of the individuals who, when you recognized bullying in the school, jump right up. I imagine that's the case, because I think our political positioning builds itself very young, I think. Mm-hmm. And I feel that people who have a political consciousness when they're 13 or 14, develop this political consciousness throughout their lives. And you seem to be the epitome of someone who continues to work creatively in that area.
Thank you. I wasn't being falsely modest. I was a frightened little kid, and such is life.
All
you're
kids
a little
are frightened.
Yes, exactly. And I know that I had come into this world with fear as part of my makeup, just from previous lives. It's just part of who I was. So I don't blame myself for being a frightened kid. I just sort of had to work with it and get through it. So, and I think I have to some extent.
So fear and being bullied. My position in this is like my position in other matters, subject to scrutiny, particularly, I feel, and thankfully by powers that be. I feel the crisis of the bullying in the United States stems from the police. And I'm talking about uniformed city police. This may be a position that others won't take, but then again, this is the position that I take. And it stems from the fact of my being arrested by a police officer in Miami, Florida. When I was 18, I had a colleague, a black colleague in my car. I was driving him home from work, afternoon, 4:30 or so. I had worked in a restaurant there, and the restaurant closed after lunch at 3:30, and by 4:30, most of the workers were gone. So I was driving a colleague, a black colleague, home. 4:30 in the afternoon, bright sunshine. Police drove up behind me, handed me my license, registration, ID, whatever, and said, "You got a nigger in your car."
Oh, really? Oh, jeez.
I said, "I have a colleague in my car, driving him home." So you ought to know, as a white boy, you don't. I said, I don't know if this is against the law. This is the reality of many of Floridians in South Florida, particularly in the late 50s, early 60s. Florida is Florida.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've gone through a lot of changes in a pretty short period of time, but the police were, up until recently, the police were basically hired to be like, tombstone cops. You expect everything to go to hell when cowboys come into town, and you treat them rough. And they were never really trained very well. And I think now, because of all Black Lives Matter more than anything, there's a sensitivity that hadn't been in place before. And it's a terrible price to pay to create sensitivity for the police, but it may not have been doable otherwise. And they need to have cameras mounted on their uniforms, and they need to be watched, but they need to basically know that what happened to you is totally unacceptable. And if they want to have a job in that sector, they better clean up their act.
Thank you. My fear and my concern about the development of bullying and that being connected with the police goes deeper. And I'm hoping that we can use this segment as a segue into the crisis and the On Point program that I mentioned, which is basically about political bullying, I feel, and about a crisis that's been fomenting in the United States for generations, and that I feel is not being talked about. Mm-hmm. And it has to do with bullying. And it has to do with your campaign. I feel your campaign is important and directly on target to the very much larger problem we have in the United States of having law enforcement, the police, networked, incredibly well networked with the federal police, databases, in profiling techniques, etc., and a level of heroism attributed to just being a police officer. Mm-hmm. The fact you wear a uniform, you are the local hero because of your being a policeman and because you're facing the incredible dangers that ostensibly the police face every day, which is not my opinion at all.
Same thing with the soldiers, people in the military. I mean, what makes them heroes? The fact that they put on a uniform in the morning? I don't buy that either. There are some heroes amongst the soldiers who do heroic things, but we've sold that whole badge of honor pretty cheaply in this country. And I think it goes back to 9/11. 9/11, all of a sudden, you had some incredible heroes with first responders, but somehow, and then you had some heroes when going out into the Middle East, but everybody started to wear that moniker of hero, and it just diluted the value of it significantly.
I agree to that analysis as well. As a veteran, I feel, and I know from my political service, from my service in the military that had a political aspect to it, that any type of political comment in the military is completely devalued and prohibited. Although we take an oath when we go into the military to defend the nation against enemies from within, internal and external enemies, we do not give up our right to free speech. However, if you are in uniform, you are not allowed to have free speech, and you will be seriously, and this is a case that I experienced, you will be seriously reprimanded and could be not only court-martialed, you could have a much stronger set of problems delivered by being political while in uniform.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you'll end up in a court system that's absolutely a kangaroo court. You know, the military code of justice has fairness as one of its objectives, but the objective overall of all military stuff is to keep the army running smoothly. It's as simple as that, or whatever the military arm is, you know, Navy or Marine. It's just meant, with an army, you can't, theoretically, you can't accept disruption. You know,
it's an interesting point, and a point that I feel you are clear about. The Nuremberg trials established international law saying that any soldier has the right to refuse an order. You're not allowed to be political. To refuse an order if it's morally against his position. Now, I don't know how far we are in the United States against or away from this concept, but I do know the history of the My Lai massacre and that how that was disregarded. So I feel...
And the hero of that, the helicopter pilot that came in and stopped the slaughter.
Exactly.
He ended up in jail for many years before anybody would accept the fact that that was a true hero.
Exactly.
He and his...
Thompson.
Was that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, he was an incredible hero. That took tremendous courage. It took a sense of humanity that, for whatever reason, was lost that day up until then. Yeah.
So Paul Stephen Stone, for those of you who have just tuned in, created a movement and what would you call this, a program against bullying in that school?
An anti-bullying program. No shit. Orange Shield.
Right.
Yeah.
And that led us basically to the idea of bullying and the various forms of bullying today in our program. Which,
well, I mean, it's very apt to what we're witnessing with the Democratic Party. They're trying to bully the shit out of Bernie and his people. They are stealing election after election.
True.
And nobody. This is what the whole thing is about. Bullying happens when nobody is watching. I mean, if the teacher was standing next to the bully, he wouldn't be bullying anybody. Hopefully. And with the Fourth Estate, the much heralded Fourth Estate, which is absolutely chicken shit. It's corporate run. It has no interest in pointing out anything that goes to Hillary's detriment. And Hillary and the DNC are just being allowed to steal this election. There's so many signs and markers about what's happening, and they're purposely ignoring them. You'd have to be blind to walk through this election field and not see all the bodies buried. You know, they're not even buried yet. You've got all the registrations that were mysteriously changed from Democratic to Republican, all the voting booths that suddenly were shuttered, all the machines that stopped working, all the electronic tallies that differed from what was being said early on. It's really criminal, and it's arrogance. And at the same time, the press, which I now call the mainstream Mediaocraty.
So this is important. This is important because this is a new word.
Yes, Mediaocraty. It's about the state of the American free press, which is no longer free. It's owned by corporations. It's all been basically homogenized down to 6 corporate owners. And Who about W.B. Mason? No, we're living in perilous times. If we lose, that's why there was an admonition against having dual ownership of the newspaper and a TV station in the same town. That's been thrown out the window under Clinton, strangely enough. And so now the press has been consolidated to where you have Comcast and you have Time Warner and a few others that own the media. And I think GE, do they still own NBC?
I think GE is part of that, yeah.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if Comcast and Verizon weren't in there.
No, Comcast owns one of the big state networks, and also movie companies too. They're all part of that package.
Media conglomerates, that's
Yes.
part of the...
And they're also, a number of them are on the Hillary's donor lists. Her top donors in the last 10 years are a lot of the people that are controlling the media. And so is it a big surprise that you never hear about a Bernie Sanders rally that breaks records for the number of people who attend? You would think that that was newsworthy. 48,000 people, according to the New York Police Department, came to see Bernie in New York City,
Wow.
Washington Square. Bernie's campaign said 27,000 because they were looking at the people in front of them, but the crowd went back for blocks. And New York was another one of those elections that was kind of jimmied and teased and stolen by DNC and the other parties. The only thing I don't know is Hillary actively doing this, or is just DNC doing it for her? That's what if I have any kind of unanswered question, that's it. But it's definitely happening. You don't have to be a weatherman to know which way the wind is blowing.
Yes, that's a quote from our youth, and I think that's exactly on target.
Yeah.
If I'm laughing, it's not because I find it funny. It's so blatant. It's so often documented. The wonderful thing of having tens of millions of cameras in your hand that can be, used at any moment.
Right. That's why Black Lives Matter suddenly mushroomed, because it's the prevalence of cameras everywhere. Yeah, video cameras everywhere. But, look at Nevada. There were any number of videos showing how that woman handled that convention. And it was a totally thuggish approach to rulemaking. She called the meeting. The meeting was called for 10 o'clock, 9:30. They start voting on temporary rules. And nobody in the press does anything except report one reporter mentioned that a chair was thrown. And it turned out to not be accurate. He didn't even stay around till the end of the session. And everybody picked it up and reported it like it happened. Bernie's supporters were being violent, and they were being outrageous and all this other crap. And this is an example. I mean, they're too freaking lazy to look at a video that everybody who supports Bernie sees online and gets pissed off about. And then you have Barbara Boxer standing up there saying, "You're booing me, you're booing Bernie, because I'm friends with Bernie." And she was obnoxious. If she had any political career left after that, it would be amazing. Yeah. She's retiring, I hear.
Thank you. It's a pleasure having someone on the show that is willing to speak truth to power, because what happened in Nevada is a scandal and should go down in the political history of Democratic convention manipulation as being an incredible blot on the landscape. And it's the Democratic National Committee, I believe. Wouldn't you call them that?
Yes. That's exactly what they are.
That organizes these putsches, these coups, these statewide manipulation, and whoever is behind this is criminal. If the laws are not in place, that's only because it's the interpretation or a lack of precedent. And this will bring me to my soapbox, and if you'll permit for a minute or two.
Your show.
Thank
Take you where you will.
Thank you so much. So, what's missing in the political and legal landscape is hundreds of thousands of politically minded citizens filing suits in superior courts throughout the United States against the activities of professional politicians and paid politicians, such as the ones manipulating the Democratic primaries and caucuses, to have a class action suit. As someone who has filed suits as a pro se litigant, meaning as an individual who files a suit and conducts his own legal work, and has had some experience in this against city governments and against large organizations, universities if necessary. The idea being to file a suit and to take that institution to court. The reason they should be taken to court is because they've either violated personal rights or political rights or both. And taking these organizations to court as a pro se litigant, just as a person who has rights, who has standing in a question because their political rights or their personal rights have been injured by this organization, taking them to court and then opening it to the public as a class action, saying anyone else who has also been injured in their personal or political rights by this organization, by this institution, can join the suit. Take the Democratic National Convention to court. Take them to court. And make them answer in a court setting to exactly what happened in Nevada, for instance, or in New York, or in Arizona.
Yeah, there's always somebody that they can use as a scapegoat. In Arizona, it was that woman who was in charge of the elections, and there's somebody, they fired 2 people in New York as though that was really the just incompetence of 2 people. The problem also is in Nevada, they had gone to a judge about something, and he said that was just a private club. It wasn't a public function. It was a private club, the Democratic National Committee, or the Nevada Democratic Party. And, you know, judges are also appointed by politicians, or they are politicians, so it gets very messy. It really does.
So I agree completely with you, Paul. It gets very messy. What's not to agree with?
Right.
It gets very messy. But then again, and this is the point that I care to make in this moment, is it's not a question about it getting messy. It's a question of they, in this case, the Democratic National Convention, has to spend money, and the pro se litigant, the individual, the person who has taken umbrage or whose rights have been violated, political rights, social rights, perhaps they were thrown out of an assembly, have been violated, they need to spend no money to take the Democratic National Convention to court because they're doing their own legal work. And of course, if the class action element is brought in, then a group of persons is then researching the idea, and if the judge throws it out for one person, then it's possible not only to appeal this, but then to find support. So the idea is courage to take the Democratic National Convention to court File a class action suit, make it public, go to the newspapers, file it, on YouTube, and institute a revolution in the United States for pro se litigants acting politically against corrupt political structures. I don't know that this is going to have any success, but I do know that it's possible to invest a lot of energy, learn an awful lot about the legal system, and perhaps create a precedent to prevent the Democratic National Convention from repeating this in 2018.
The biggest thing I think it works against you is that, and I don't understand it, and he hasn't spoken about it publicly, Bernie and his wife have chosen to not highlight all the nefarious things that are being done out in the election landscape. For whatever reason, they just lick their wounds and move on to he lost Kentucky very closely. 16 different counties have reported instances of election fraud. And maybe the results will be turned, and maybe he'll turn out to have won Kentucky. I suspect he would have won by a landslide. But this whole thing has been so steeply rigged against him. And he chooses not, he counts his victories and moves on. And it's very interesting. At first I thought he was
naive.
Crazy. Yeah, I thought it was crazy. But it's too obvious now that and he talks about the systems being rigged and all that, but he doesn't talk about the actual cheating, which I think is more important. I mean, rigged, it sounds as though it's sort of like something that some bad boy did, when you weren't looking. Cheating and stealing, theft, election theft is criminal.
Would you be willing, Paul, to speak about bullying? You've mentioned this before, bullying in that context again?
Well, no, I was saying that essentially the Democratic National Committee has chosen to bully its own constituency. It's bizarre, but it's allowed itself to become so biased in favor of one party that it allows itself to actually just lean on and bully the other party. And they've got these secret finance deals with the Clinton campaign. There's a lot of ways in which they've been anything but impartial. And I think they would do anything short of murder. And I don't even know, maybe she wouldn't draw the line there either. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, everybody in the country that isn't for her is against her. It's amazing. This woman has become the lightning rod for all the displeasure because she's the one who's set up the debates to begin with, and she's the one that's taken umbrage at Bernie not decrying the violence of his supporters in Nevada. And she's so full of shit. Excuse the language. She's so full of shit. But anyway, they're playing this game by hook and crook. They'll do anything they can to win. And there's really something to be said for somebody that plays the game above that. Unfortunately, if you end up losing because of that, then there's nothing to be said. There's a certain sort of moral high ground that Bernie has easily captured because Hillary isn't standing on anything that's moral. Before I started to support Bernie, I just remember to talk to my people out there, I thought that Hillary was a decent person. I thought she had some value as a potential presidential nominee. Now, given all I've learned about her and the fact that she would allow her campaign to enlist all this skullduggery that they've used, basically she's not worthy of being president of a democracy. She's crapping all over the democratic process. She's suppressing people's rights to vote. And who the hell, what makes her suitable for president? If you can't even allow your people to vote because you're afraid they'll vote against you, you should never be president. Never.
But Paul, then again, let's look at the two candidates. Talk about bullies. Doesn't Donald Trump appear to be a bully?
He does. And in really the old-fashioned ways. He will talk you down. He's big, he's imposing, and he's totally bullish about his point of view. Yeah, he seems like a bully, absolutely.
Yes.
I just hope the choice isn't one bully or the other.
Donald Trump it's my opinion as well that Donald Trump is a bully, and his attitude is as an apprentice, where he gained his first national fame, was a bully attitude as employer.
Right.
You're fired was, I believe, his catchphrase, and then looking really mean and don't cross me. I mean, if you look at the political photos that the campaign uses, you see Bernie Sanders looking normally into the camera, and Donald Trump is squinting, and he's got this don't even cross my
He's got his
path.
finger raised.
Right. Don't even cross my path, and his eyes are narrowed. And I believe that Trump is serious about this position. He thrives on being a bully. He's has a history of bullying, and I believe his parents, as a matter of fact, earned their millions by buying up housing in which the tenants were impoverished, public housing, and then running roughshod over these minorities, poor.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Oh, I believe there's a lot of documentation on that, and if there's not, then I mean somebody is missing a real opportunity to look into
Woody
that.
Guthrie, I think he might have written a song about his landlord, who was Trump's father.
Really?
I think so.
Wow.
Yeah, he certainly spoke about his dislike for his landlord. I know that.
Wow. Yeah, that's. I think bullies, and to go back to Paul's point about bullying, it's a national disgrace, and I believe it's part of our national character. There's an idea of national character which is debated by sociologists, not debated by me personally, but by sociologists and cultural anthropologists, saying that the idea of a national character is too unscientific to actually ascribe to a nation of 300 million individuals. But then again, a book in the 1960s when I was actually I graduated from high school, to be clear, 1961, so The Ugly American came out about 1956, and it was required reading for our class, and it's basically about bullying. It's about
Bullying foreign countries and people in foreign countries, absolutely. I don't know if it's because we're still a young country, which may be part of the problem. I mean, we've been acting like a teenager who's just gotten his first high, and he goes out and he beats somebody up just because he's under the influence. We're kind of thoughtless and reckless in what we do.
reckless.
We went into the Middle East. I mean, that was reckless and really without provocation, going into Iraq. But then we put somebody who has absolutely no qualifications in charge of the country, dealing with the country in the aftermath of that.
Bremen.
Bremer.
Thank you. Bremer.
Yes, Arthur Bremer. And he was a disaster.
Oh my God.
He was a disaster. He fires the army, fires the police, and suddenly the place is lawless. Surprise, surprise.
Took all of the Baathists out of party, outlawed the Baathist party. I mean,
So all those people-
insanity, actually, completely insanity.
Right.
All of the structural political elements, the law-keeping elements.
And if you look at MacArthur, who ruled Japan after the war, he didn't take apart all their traditions and all their authoritative structure. He changed what they were teaching in school. That was one of the big things he did. And he didn't embarrass the emperor. He didn't do anything to make them feel like lesser individuals. He didn't have to. They just lost the war. And the same thing could have been true in Iraq. You got rid of a dictator, but you had a lot of people that were suffering. You could have cared for them a little better, but we didn't care. Rumsfeld is absolutely, there's a
Criminal.
there's a special place in hell for Rumsfeld, I believe, and Cheney, and that whole group, and Condoleezza Rice with their bullshit mushroom cloud talk and all that garbage. They absolutely should. They should all meet in hell sooner rather.
We're indebted. The public is indebted to you, Paul, for speaking truth to power. It's quite true. The Dante's Inferno and the special levels of hell is definitely, there are 7 levels of hell, but I believe you're speaking about the 8th level for American politicians. Bremer, one of them, Cheney, Rumsfeld, Bush, the Attorney General who came up with the idea that torture is legitimate, and Guantanamo Bay.
John Woo, that guy that was working in the Justice Department. Who wrote all the justification for it.
Incredible. But this is the 9th or 8th or 9th level of hell, this individual.
Yeah.
Because he knows, these individuals know the law. They know the constitutionality. They know precisely what they're doing. And they disregard it completely and create a new law. They're creating a new political and legal structure to justify
torture, right.
And this is part of the reason why, to get back to my call to the American public and viewers, to take the bastards to court. The reason they need to be taken to court is because since the Bush administration, there has been a concerted effort to change the legal system, and Barack Obama, who taught constitutional law at the University of Chicago, did not do anything to recreate it, to change it back legally, because as a legal scholar, it would be easy for him to just set up a commission to re-examine what Bush had done and to correct it from the legal point of view. But because he's such, let me choose my words clearly, because Barack Obama is a very conservative politician, regardless of the fact that he worked at University of Chicago, regardless of the fact that he was an organizer, Barack Obama is a very conservative legal scholar, and it's become clear in his position as president that he did not roll back the legal justification that the Bush administration put forward. And that's his expertise.
He made some real big missteps or mistakes. He really should have had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because what was done was not acceptable, and you can't just erase it by saying we're not torturing anymore and sign a document, because you're right. Next guy signs another document, we're torturing again. We actually executed Japanese prisoners, soldiers who had committed waterboard torture on American soldiers.
And now we're doing it legally. Now we're doing it.
And you get the Republican Party, all the bozos that were on the Republican Party debate stage, calling for torture, calling for carpet bombing.
Cruz.
Absolutely. As though other populations don't matter. The only population that matters is the American population.
Complete bullying.
That's right. There's no
criminal bullying.
There's no standing for anybody else. I think Obama was so afraid of being classified as an angry black that I think he went overboard to be anything but. And I think and also Bush basically co-opted him when Obama and Michelle were staying at the White House. And I don't think he wanted to put the spotlight on Bush. So for whatever reason, he did us a great disservice, because what we did in Iraq is criminal. And whether you charge anybody with crimes, you should at least be able to say they're an unindicted co-conspirator at the very least. But everybody gets to write his book and explain his vision of history.
Thank you. I agree that everyone should be able to write their book. And do you have a book in planning?
I have a novel I'm working on.
Really?
Yes, yes.
Would you like to mention that? Would you like to mention what
Well,
it's
I'll
about?
mention the one I've written already. Actually, you can go to paulstephenstone.com and you can see all the all my work, whether it's my advertising work or this Bernie campaign. But I wrote a novel called Or So It Seems, and that's a spiritual odyssey, one fellow putting his life together after divorce. And I have a book of, I used to write a newspaper column, and I have a book of best of 25 years worth of columns. It's very creative, actually. It's called How to Train a Rock. A rock, not Iraq. And there it is.
Yeah, that's just too beautiful. The title alone is too beautiful. Any of us who have had animals at home, particularly a dog, one can't train a cat, I don't believe. You have animals at home?
I have a little dog, Deja Vu. She's a cutie. She's a sweet dog.
Can you train that dog?
She's smart. She trains us. Trains us to get up at 4:30 in the morning and let her out to pee, and trains us to feed her. She's a great companion. You know, you can't. We clearly must have known her in a different life. She's just. My wife and I will be standing in a room talking, and suddenly you look over and there she is. She just wants to be part of the family. So it's like we're having a family conference, are we? And she shows up. Yes. How about you?
No. I've had pets. There's some stories about pets. I've had a dog as a pet and cats as pets. They're wonderful. I don't presently have any pets. I live in an apartment building, and there are restrictions for. We're allowed to have pets, but they recommend goldfish.
Right. Have to be small enough to flush.
Right.
That was the ultimate exit for most of the pets I had as a kid, whether it was an alligator with a little painted shell, or fish, or guppies, the whole thing. Down in New York sewer system.
There was also a movement when I was in college to swallow fish. You remember that? There was.
I think that's in the 20s.
Oh, really?
I think that was one of those silly things they did in the 20s.
Really? No kidding.
Yeah.
How about that? But it's true, right? I mean, people actually did that, right?
Yeah, and there were people that actually consumed parts of automobiles. Don't ask me why, but they were like, and there were people that would eat glass. You know, I think they probably died young, but stupid stuff that people do.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Pets, I think, I can't really explain the sentimentality of Americans. It's another point that maybe we can get a look at, this incredible sentimentality of the American psyche. We are, I believe, back to national character, the idea that sociologists and anthropologists, social anthropologists do not accept that it's not possible to assign a particular psyche to a nation because it's unscientific to do so.
Right.
But we do have a picture of the French, and if someone says that's French or French-like, one knows basically. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, and you can break that down. When I was in Club Med one time, and middle of the week, a boatload of New Yorkers showed up, and you can say you shouldn't overgeneralize, but they were loud, they were coarse, they were crass. If you ate with one of them, they would stack their plates, eat a little something, then go back for more without eating the rest of it. And I'm from New York, and it was a terrible experience. I mean, they took the whole level of the place down a notch. I mean, that's some accomplishment. But you think about American common characteristics, and you think about the GIs in World War II, and there was a good reason why they were called GIs, good intentioned Joes. That's what the initials stood for. Because we were doing what needed to be done, and that was very heroic. It wasn't easy, but we were safe on our side of we had been bombed in Pearl Harbor, but no, we needed to get over there and help the Europeans beat that really nasty fellow before he killed the rest of the Europeans.
Thank you for bringing that aspect in, and I feel as a leftist, I would like to try to clarify the idea that we as Americans in the Second World War, my father was a soldier from 1943, I believe, might be from 42, I'm not actually certain of that. But was injured, seriously injured, and spent 8 months in a lazaret, came back with a metal plate in his head, and went on to be a successful and a terrific dad, fathered 2 children, my sister and I, and lived to be 48 years of age and successful, not only as a parent, in spite of the divorce.
Mm-hmm. That was a different war.
That was a different war, exactly.
Vietnam was so dirty.
So incredible.
We had no right to be there. We had no reason for losing thousands of our young men. And
Over 50,000.
Same thing with Iraq. And so when you get a war that has absolutely no honest justification, the whole psychic experience is different. People come back with a lot more troubles and a lot more trauma, and somebody's still pretending that they were heroes when they were actually not heroes, but they were just sort of cannon fodder. But the World War II, my father was in a bomber that got shot down.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And those things were death traps.
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely.
That was basically a death sentence to be able... He was a navigator, and the plane got shot up, and he parachuted out over the channel, close enough to England to...
That was
survive.
fortunate if he landed in the channel. That was really fortunate.
Yeah, well, the plane made it that far. Absolutely. It was all shot up. But, he never had any nightmares, or he never had any lingering stuff related to the war. Yeah, he didn't have any of that PTSD. He, we never asked him about it. He never talked about it. We had his bomber jacket, and it had yellow bombs on the back for every mission he flew. And he maybe had 40 or 30.
Terrific.
Yeah. Oh no, he was lucky. And his plane was called Plucky Lucky, interestingly enough, and it had a curvaceous pin-up type illustration on the front of the fuselage. And it was a different time, and war there was very honorable. You had somebody that was really a threat to humanity. And Nuremberg trials reflected that we demanded that you don't give up your humanity or your honor, even in times of war.
It's precisely that. Paul Stephen Stone. It's precisely that. The Nuremberg trials, we were still honorable enough as a nation, in spite of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, honorable enough as a nation to demand legal clarification of both from the Japanese and the German governments as to what is acceptable in war and what's not acceptable in war. It's not as though this hasn't been addressed, but it was addressed again, and we're denying it in our warfare from the Bush government and the Obama government as well. And I fear, basically, for the Trump government, if Trump is to become president of the United States.
There's still lingering garbage from all that stuff, and somebody needs to open up the window shades, and somebody needs to sweep out all that crap. South Africa did itself such a tremendous good deed, having a Truth and Reconciliation, and a lot of nasty stuff came out, but it was like the psyche was healed, or at least started to heal. And there's no other way you can do it but with the truth. We're still pretending that Bush was justified. The country still pretends, at least half of it, that we had every justification for going in and bombing Iraq. And that's not healthy because it sets the stage for the next schmuck to bomb the hell out of somebody and say that, well, I had every right to do it. So I think we need to be a lot more tough on ourselves.
I think it's true.
Harry Truman with the bomb, just to say, he was told, as my understanding, that America would lose 50,000 troops, fatalities, if we had to try to take those islands back. Because the Japanese were incredibly difficult to remove, and if we were going to fight our way to Japan. So he basically ended it with 2 bombs. So you can argue that he was protecting 50,000 Americans when he did that, killed 100,000 or more Japanese.
We're in the last minute or so, Paul Stephenstone. If you would like to think of a few words in your campaign, your Orange campaign.
Oh, thank you. If you go on to paulstephenstone.com and go to where it highlights my work, there's a page there, there's a link there to my Orange Shield Facebook page, which pretty much covers all the information that you need to find out about it. And you can contact me via the website if you have any interest in maybe trying out the program for your school or for as a business proposition. And thank you for having me, Terrence.
Pleasure.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Well, I think that's overstated.
Well, I think he who toils day after day.
Well, that's you. You've written 2 novels and ad campaigns.
No.
Paul Stephenstone, always a pleasure to have here on our show. And in the last minute, in the last 30 seconds, again, I'm calling on citizens throughout the United States to file suits as a pro se litigant. Anyone in the state of Nevada has the right to do that against the Democratic National Convention.